we have been receiving many proposals to suspend the imposition of excise taxes on petroleum products. Before we start, we just want to say that we have analyzed the situation very carefully, and we want to make sure that any recommendation we make is really good for the country, especially for the people who are in need of assistance. To start with, let us analyze the taxes that are imposed on fuel. There are two taxes that are imposed on fuel. The first is the excise tax. Excise tax means a tax on the fuel withdrawn from the depot. Okay, that's an excise tax. That is a tax on the volume. It is not related to the value of the tax. So prior to train, we had a tax of 4 pesos and 35 centavos per liter. And this was the same tax from 2005 to 2017. That was the tax on gasoline. There was no tax on diesel, no tax on kerosene, and no tax on liquefied petroleum gas. However, in 2016 or 17, we recommended and the Congress agreed to impose the following taxes: 10 pesos per liter on gasoline, 6 pesos per liter for diesel, 5 pesos per liter on kerosene, and 3 pesos per liter on petroleum gas, LPG. Per kilo yan, hindi per liter, per kilo. The reason we did this is because we needed funds for our Build program and for our program, 10-point economic program of the government. Remember that in 2017, in exchange for an increase in taxes, we also reduced the taxes to 99% of all the taxpayers. In fact, the result was each taxpayer, 99% of them, got an average of 1 month's salary for the year from the reduction of the tax. So we did two things. We increased the tax on fuel because we needed it for build, and we reduced the taxes on the individuals who were earning a salary. And we exempted taxes of anybody earning less than 250,000 pesos a year. So we have to keep that in mind. We also impose a tax of VAT. Value-added tax is a tax on on anything you buy, including fuel. So we estimated that if we suspend the fuel excise taxes under train, it will reduce the total government revenue by 105.9 billion pesos in 2022. In 2023, that goes up to 114.4 billion pesos. In 2024, 123.6 billion pesos, and so on. For the 10-year average of 160.3 billion pesos a year, or a total of 1.763.2 trillion pesos for 10 years. This is equivalent to roughly 0.5% of our GDP. We expected to collect a total of 147.1 billion pesos in fuel excise tax and VAT in 2022. So this is the amounts that we were expecting to collect in quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. And the total excise tax is 131.4 billion pesos and the VAT is 15.8 billion pesos for a total of 147 billion. Now, if we cut this tax, this tax of 147 billion that we estimate we will collect in 2022 has already been put in the budget and has already been allocated for different expenditures. And those expenditures are for our build, for the salaries of government employees, including soldiers, including policemen, including teachers. So that money has already been allocated. And if we suspend this and we don't collect it, what will happen is our debt to GDP ratio will go up from an estimated 7.7% to 8.2%. And it will mean that if we will continue to spend the same amount of money, we will have to borrow more money. And that will bring up our debt to GDP ratio to about 61.4%. So, in other words, if we reduce the taxes, first of all, if we reduce the excise tax, it will reduce the cost of fuel by 10 pesos. And if we reduce so that is the first thing. Now, if we do reduce the tax, let us analyze now who will benefit. We have analyzed it and we know that the top 10% of income earners in the Philippines consume almost 50% of all the fuel. In other words, if we look at the bottom 50% of the Philippines, they only consume 13% of the fuel. So cutting the tax will benefit more the people who have cars and they are the richer people. We will not be benefiting so much the bottom 50% of our population. That will make it very inequitable. What we should do instead, I think, is to provide targeted relief to the most vulnerable sectors of our society. And we will fund that from the higher VAT taxes, which we will collect because the fuel prices are going to be higher. Now, we have estimated that if the fuel price is $100 per barrel, we will collect an additional 20 billion pesos in VAT. If it's $110 a barrel, which is what it is today, it will be 26 billion pesos. $120 per barrel, we will be collecting an extra 31.8 billion. $125 per barrel, 34.6 billion, and $130 per barrel, 37.5 billion pesos. So this is the extra money that we have not yet allocated. So our recommendation, Mr. President, is to use this extra tax money to subsidize the poorer sections, the poorer people in our society. Okay. So we think that the average price might be around $110 per barrel for the year. Therefore, we will have an additional 26 billion pesos to distribute directly. What we have already done and what you have approved, Mr. President, last week is that we have doubled the fuel subsidy to public transportation from 2.5 billion to 5 billion and providing subsidies to farmers and fisher folks, increasing the budget from 500 million to 1.1 billion to reduce their costs. Now, the first tranche of this has been paid today. We paid 2.5 billion pesos and 500 million pesos respectively. Next month, we will release another 5 billion pesos and 600 million pesos for farmers. So this is the first step. The second step is we propose to provide additional relief through an unconditional cash transfer to the poorest 50% of our population. And we propose that we will give them an additional 200 pesos per month or 2,400 pesos per year for each household. Now, we have around 12 million households who are 50% and below, and the number of people in those households are around 70 million. So, that will cost us 33.1 billion. A little more than what we are going to what we expect to be collecting from the additional VAT on fuel. So this is our firm recommendation, Mr. President. One, to retain the fuel excise tax imposed under train law because we already budgeted it for salaries of school teachers, build program, and other expenses. And second, we provide targeted subsidies of 200 pesos per month per household for 1 year to the bottom 50% of the Filipino households. This will amount to 33.1 billion pesos in budgetary requirement. Mr. President, we realize that this is not enough, but this is what we can afford as of this time. And to make sure that our finances going forward, and especially for the next administration, are still going to be healthy, this, I believe, is what we can afford. So, to summarize again, retain the fuel excise taxes imposed under train law, provide targeted subsidies to the lowest 50% of the households in the Philippines, totaling around 12 million people. And this will cost 33.1 million pesos for the first year. So this is our recommendation, Mr. President. Thank you.
Sunny, may subsidy na yung mga di talagang yung mga hirap.
Yes. Yes.
Yung number 2, an additional in addition to
Yes,
what?
this is in addition to what they are receiving, yung mga 4Ps.
Magdagdagan yung makuha nila.
Yes. Yes po.
Pangdagdag ito para sa may pinakamahirap na Pilipino.
And this is sustainable. This is something that we can sustain, and this is something that we can afford as of this time. So I hope that, Mr. President, you will support this recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything from the other, wala kayong ano. So, sige, yun ang policy ng Executive Department. Now, salamat for the enlightened picture.